Hello and welcome to this Year 11 webinar, which is about 3 key aspects of writing. So it's understanding persuasive techniques and audience awareness. That's for opinion writing. Structure, content and organisation for opinion writing, again at grade 9 level, and technical accuracy for opinion writing at grade 9 level. We need to explain that when we talk about grade 9 level, it's a notional grade. It's the exam board that sets the grade. And as you know, grade 9 is almost equivalent to an A star. You know, it's only the very top. I think it's 5% of the population who are awarded that. So they look at all the scripts across the whole of the country and decide the top, very top, and award that grade. So it's a notional grade. It's not as if that you know that you'll get a grade 9 because the exam board set that. But the advice that I'm giving you today is what would you do to get the very best mark to show that you have the skills to be awarded the best mark. So we're looking at a very specific assignment today. So it's more children should get a job before the age of 16. Part-time work teaches valuable skills not learned at school. Write an article for a Broadsheet newspaper in which you explain your views on this issue. So by the end of this session, you would have understood what to do and what to include in this assignment in order to try and get the best grade possible, the top mark. So the first thing to do is to talk really about how to pass with flying colours. So for opinion writing, there are 4 key things to understand. You need to understand about persuasive techniques. You need to be aware of your audience. You need to make sure that structure and organisation, the content is really very good. And you also need to make sure that your technical accuracy, SPAG or VSPAG that I call it, is really very good. So those are the 4 main aspects of opinion writing that really will make you pass with flying colours. So what does grade 9 mean? Well, grade 9 is the absolute top grade. It's a much coveted grade, and it means that you can write opinion pieces that are compelling. Compelling means that they are clever, they are original, they are imaginative, they're inventive, they're creative. There is a spark, there is a flair, there is something that the reader, the examiner, has not ever heard before or never seen before. It's compelling. They want to read the work and probably disappointed because it's finished, because it's so engaging and so unique and so original. So roughly, and again, this is a notional grade 9. In the past few years, to hit the grade 9 is about 36 out of 40, so about 90%, that kind of ballpark, and that is upper level 4 on the mark scheme. So again, this comes with the warning, I don't want you to go back to your teacher and say, I got 90% on this assignment, why haven't you awarded me a grade 9? Remember, grade 9 is awarded really by the exam boards, and the exam grade boundaries change from year to year, you know, ever so slightly or perhaps a lot. So you can only know what a real grade 9 is at the end of an exam season. So this really is giving you advice on how to write the best possible piece that you can for this specific assignment. So when we think about the mark scheme, and I hope that you've started familiarising yourself with the writing mark scheme, this is what I mean by an upper level 4. You'll see that for writing, there are 4 different levels. 1 is the lowest and 4 is the highest, and 2 different aspects of writing that you're being assessed on. Content and organisation is what you say, the ideas that you include, and how you structure your piece. And then technical accuracy, or VSPAG, is how well you express your ideas and how accurately you write. So for both of those together, the combination is 40 marks. And you can see really for the top grades, it's no surprise to you that for the top grades, you need to be hitting the top level. So if we suggest that the grade 9 maybe begins possibly at 36, marks out of 40, then you would see that you'll need to be getting out of the 24 for content and organization, 22 or 23 right at the top of level 3. And then for VSPG or technical accuracy, you'll need to be hitting 13, 14, 50 right at the top of that level. So it's really a stretch. It's something very difficult to achieve, but it is the passion and the target for many young people across the country. And it's not impossible if you work very hard. So the first audience that you need to be aware of is the examiner. Obviously, they are your first audience and they are using the mark scheme to assess your writing. And the mark scheme covers 5 different aspects that I've kind of summarized into caves. So that's what they're judging you on. And they'll be looking really for the top students to fulfill some of the skills in the criteria for the mark scheme. So communication, your communication should be stylishly expressed. For opinion writing, your opinions should be stylishly expressed. You'll back them up or support them, justify your opinions with examples, but they'll be clever examples. They'll be inventive. They might be allusions to literature, to mythology, to the Bible. You'd use metaphors as well as all different types of evidence to support your opinions. So, for example, something like this: teens are exploited and disrespected by misanthropic employers who are worse than Scrooge and many other employers belong in Victorian novels. One Year 10 student who vaguely resembled Oliver Twist was forced by a Fagin-like boss to work extra shifts without being given any notice. And statistics from the BBC suggest that 80% of under 16s take home little more than Bob Cratchit earned. So can you see the use of examples is linked with references to Victorian literature, to Dickens, to Scrooge, to Oliver Twist, to Bob Cratchit. It's attempting to be inventive and unusual and creative and original in everything that's being done, even the use of examples to support a stylishly expressed opinion. In terms of the A for the mark scheme that the examiner is looking at, it's appropriateness. So because this piece is a formal piece for a broadsheet newspaper, there's an expectation that the expression will be formal. So for a candidate who's working at grade 9 standard, you would use formal phrases, you would use idioms and proverbial phrases. So formal phrases like notwithstanding, which means even though, albeit, this is what adults kind of write with, admittedly, and then proverbial phrases like when in Rome, meaning you need to kind of obey the expected and necessary rules. Discretion is the best part of valor. It's a proverbial phrase that you hear adults saying, really saying, it's better to avoid danger than to confront it. Necessity is the mother of invention. You may have heard that, basically saying that desperation drives you to creativity, and familiarity breeds contempt. So it's kind of saying that close relationships lead to a lack of respect. So you would be conversant, you'd be very comfortable with using these proverbial idiomatic phrases as a grade 9 candidate. And that's the kinds of things that examiners would be looking at. Also, vocabulary would be really ambitious for a grade 9 candidate. So perhaps the nouns would be really where you see the quality of a grade 9 writer who is compelling. So words like acumen, which mean the ability to make good judgments, altruism would be relevant for this assignment, which is about, should we be wasting time on part-time work, earning money, or perhaps we should use our time in a more selfless or altruistic way. You might talk about avarice instead of greed. You might talk about the fact that young people can work with aplomb. That means self-confidence, rather than being prone to introspection, drawing into your own mental state or emotional state, and that the whole idea of rapprochement or rapprochement, if you want to say it in the French style, harmonious relationships being established, and maybe that parents can see a simulacrum of themselves, an image of themselves in their own children. So can you see that as a grade 9 candidate, you'd be using these sophisticated and ambitious words with ease, with accuracy, and with flair. And then thinking about engagement and structure, a grade 9 candidate would really be thinking about deeper and wider issues, social, moral, political, ecologic, practical issues. But they would also be using humor, irony, and satire. So that would possibly be a real distinction for a grade 9 candidate, the ease and the appropriateness with which they use hyperbolic characters or scenarios to exaggerate problems. So one example might be something like talking about the dangers of work. One child's apron was accidentally set alight in a poorly supervised kitchen that flouted health and safety regulations. This is one way to set the world on fire, but I suggest that adolescents can be fire starters in a more positive way. You can see they're being ironic. They're mocking the fact that the safety rules are flouted, adding humor here that's saying this is the person setting the world alight. So obviously that has a double meaning. It's a metaphorical and a literal meaning. Perhaps another use of humor, irony, or satire might be something like this. Perhaps there would be an excessive sense of shame if the majority of Year 11 students could afford better modes of transport than their educators. Imagine the shame of a child owning a superior car before their 16th birthday than their teachers because of part-time work. I suppose this is not the drive that educationalists refer to when they encourage youngsters to succeed in their exams. So it's that sense of sarcasm, almost irony, that's mocking, but in a tongue-in-cheek way, that because a student has been involved in part-time work, they own a better car than their teacher, and they show the drive that people want them to show in education. So again, it's playing on words, it's mocking the situation, it's seeing the humorous side to make an effective point that's memorable, but also inventive and original. So the other audience to consider is really the audience of the specific piece. For this one, this is our broadsheet audience. They are educated, so it's formal, you're having to justify your viewpoints. So for a broadsheet audience, then the grade 9 candidate is really thinking, right, how can I be unusual? How can I be different? How can I think from a different demographic viewpoint? How can I perhaps think about the shopkeeper's perspective and how a shopkeeper might actually really value the fact that teenagers are there, they add life and joy to him or her who might be kind of isolated and on their own, and the teenagers bring that spark of life and energy. What about perhaps taking the point of view of an overprotective parent who finally cuts the apron strings, as they say, allows their child to work and sees them flourish, and it actually supports the parent therapeutically to see their child work? Maybe the perspective of a computer game addict who was in their own world of computer games, who tried work and then retreated back into their computer game. So again, it's ironic about how he didn't like work, but really should have been more willing to face different challenges outside his comfort zone. What about different cultural attitudes? I know that in Nigerian culture, people are encouraged to work quite young. It's just part of being in a household that you would work, you would do things around the house, you would look after younger children from a very young age, whereas perhaps in this culture it's more frowned upon. So taking a different cultural attitude might be interesting, or maybe even taking a global perspective and saying, actually, round the world children are exploited. Round the world, child labor is horrific. Why would we want to bring it to a democratic country? So it's taking a different viewpoint and perspective. Maybe you would take the viewpoint of an animal and talk about the difference between a teenager who takes them for a walk, who perhaps is being employed as a dog walker versus someone who's not, and getting it from the animal's perspective, or maybe from an inanimate object, that talking about a till and how a till feels when an old person is on, when they're refreshed and energized, when a teenager takes control of the till. So taking a different perspective from a different person or different demographic may well be a sign that you're a grade 9 candidate, because you're thinking about things that are inventive and original and unique. Again, different experiences. You may perhaps talk about unexpected experiences, perhaps of work and neglect in the workplace, maybe unexpected experiences, perhaps describing what it's like to be a newspaper deliverer in the rain and the snow. Maybe it's delightful, maybe it's dreadful. Perhaps taking the unexpected experience where teenagers find something or use technology because they've been using it at work. What about expectations? How about undermining our expectations? We all think that teenagers are reluctant to get up in the morning. What about undermining the audience's expectations and talking about teenage entrepreneurs who have spark and ingenuity and have really changed things on a national or a global level? And what about subverting our prior knowledge? Maybe talking about those teenage millionaires, those young people who've made their millions because of part-time work and because of their creativity. So instead of going for the obvious and the simple and the things that are expected, the norm, a grade 9 candidate would really start thinking about how their audience would expect something fresh, something inventive, something unusual, something unexpected, something new that really subverts our expectations. Right, persuasive techniques. Now, I know that many people know DeForest, direct address, anecdote, alliteration, facts, opinion of experts, rhetorical questions, emotive language, exaggeration, statistics, and triplets. So all of these different persuasive techniques are key, because as a grade 9 candidate, you know that as well as having really inventive ideas and really interesting content, your persuasive techniques also need to be inventive and interesting. So DeForest is really helpful. Heat is really helpful. Hyperphora, when you pose a question, you answer it yourself. Do you know what I mean? Of course you do. Epistrophe, where you have the end of the sentence, you have on buses, exhausted children. In the playground, exhausted children. In classroom. So you've got the same phrase or word at the end of the sentence. Anaphora, which is the opposite, the same phrase or sentence at the beginning of the sentence. When will you listen? When will you change? When will you learn? When is repeated at the beginning. It's front loaded, it will foregrounded. Tricolon, when you've got the parallel of words or phrases or clauses. We refuse to give up, we refuse to give in, they refuse to step down. So refuse to is repeated 3 times. And then epizeuxis, where you've got the repetition of words in a succession within the same sentence. What were you thinking? Never, never, never. Could you stop today? I say today. Today is a time to act. So some of those are more sophisticated persuasive devices, but a grade 9 candidate will also know that description is persuasion, and they would be feeling quite confident about using description as persuasion, perhaps talking about the rivers of sweat pouring down faces, the crack and the crunch of breaking bones. Might be about the personifying shiny pebbles and crisp notes and smudged cheeks of grubby notes, cheekily peeking out of bulging wallets, that temptation of money, or these poor children like aged turtles being crushed under the weight of the burden of part-time work. So understanding really that the persuasive devices that are persuasive, DeForest and Heat, are just as good as description. The description is just as good as the persuasive devices. So you're using the full range as a grade 9 candidate. Right, content and organization. What can we say about structuring your piece? I think you need to absolutely, definitely have a 3-point structure. You have an introduction, you have your main body, and then you have a conclusion. But for a grade 9 candidate, it won't be formulaic. That's why it's compelling, because it's original, it's unique, it's inventive, it's creative, it's clever. So you could start with an inspirational quote, a song lyric, maybe a proverbial phrase, maybe some kind of statistic that's really clever or an unusual opinion. And then you would go perhaps into multifaceted paragraphs with contrasting tones that seamlessly integrate, perhaps taking different demographic viewpoints, different experiences, subverting our expectation, undermining our prior knowledge, so that by the end we are thoroughly thrilled and compelled by the argument. And in the conclusion, you might be using humor or call to action or some kind of circularity that you as a grade 9 candidate would plan carefully to make sure that this is an interrelated, seamlessly integrated structure that's multifaceted. That means there's lots of different clever parts to it, but it's not formulaic, that it's unique and original and clever. Okay, for the last part of the session, we don't have that much time, is to really think about technical accuracy. What does technical accuracy at grade 9 level look at? What does VSPG look like? Because it is so important. It's worth 40% of the entire grade. So at grade 9 level, I would suggest that vocabulary is really cleverly chosen, not individual words, but groups of words. So semantic fields or lexical sets are being used. So a group of words. So for example, maybe you're thinking about being using exaggeration, being hyperbolic about children working part-time. And so you're going to use a whole group of words to do with death. And what you're saying that dies by working early is your conscience. So for example, part-time work will be the death of a teenager's conscience. Their well-being is assassinated slowly but surely by late night, murderous late nights and the murderous disease of materialism. The grim reaper of greed removes every ounce of altruism as its casualties sit in greasy restaurants counting their coins of avarice, wasting away. So it's this idea of death and murder and destruction. So it's a whole group of words, a whole field or set of words that are linked with the same theme, death, the erosion of innocence and the loss of the conscience. And that's really the kinds of vocabulary a grade 9 candidate would be using comfortably. What about spelling? Well, polysyllabic words would be spelled accurately. So you'd understand about what they are. You'd really find some really helpful words and really work out how to spell them accurately, like indefatigably, which means tirelessly. So you think about the fatigue in the middle and the ability at the end, and really work out how to spell that. Pusillanimity, I can't even say that word. It's showing this lack of courage. So you'd work out how to say that and how to spell it. And then ubiquity, something that's found everywhere. So thinking about polysyllabic words and really pronouncing them and spelling them accurately would be really good for grade 9. What about sentences and grammar? So you would obviously use really accurate sentences. They'd be clear, they'd be varied. The openings of the sentences would be very varied. The sentence forms, you'd use questions, you'd use exclamations, you'd use lists, they'd be varied. But you'd also probably use conditional clauses. So if we stop the assassination of future dreams, every hope of office happiness will be executed by part-time work. So it's this idea of if, and again, this idea of assassinating hope and executing hope and future dreams, unless youngsters allow their indefatigability, I can't say it today, to be fully utilized, their youthful energies will be killed by passivity. So it's that unless, and trying to really use that ambitious vocabulary and polysyllabic words. And then when you show me a businessman with a conscience, then and only then can I agree that part-time work will be beneficial for youngsters under 16. So it's ironic, this idea that successful businessmen don't have a conscience. Greed and the conscience don't go together, and we have to be preparing our children for a different future. Right, finally, punctuation. So grade 9 candidates would use the full range. They'd use end punctuation, full stops accurately, question marks, exclamations accurately, ellipsis. They would use lists that are introduced with colons. They would use parentheses, so clauses and information embedded within the sentence, using dashes, using commas, using brackets. And they'd also be able to use speech mark, perhaps with sarcasm. A 13-year-old girl in Liverpool was woken up by a concerned boss at 6 a.m. screaming insults and the end of her newly purchased mobile phone. So that kind of sense of irony, satire, mocking, tongue-in-cheek, light-hearted, but really making a serious point as well, using the full range of punctuation. Okay, so how do we recap? There's a lot of information. So for obviously, unsurprisingly, for grade 9 candidates, it needs to be there, the upper level 4. It needs to be a compelling, original, inventive, clever. It needs to also make sure that you're thinking about your first audience, which is the examiner, and what the examiner is looking for is stylishly expressed opinions with inventive examples, formal proverbial phrases, ambitious vocabulary, and really clever use of humor, irony, and satire. You're always thinking of being inventive and unusual and subverting expectations. You're always thinking about how to shape and structure a piece that's not formulaic, and you're always thinking about being as detailed and as accurate as possible. And I hope that helps you understand the kinds of things you do to secure a notional grade 9. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.